How can we not do this one? It's Tennent's Brewery. All right, addressing the elephant in the room first. I do not have Tenants Lager or Tennent Super here. Threefold reason, probably. I bought these all up in the brewery and I was no way ever going to buy Tennent's Lager to take home from the brewery. That's a bit weird. Secondly, I can't find it anywhere near me. I thought it would be sold everywhere. No chance, can't find it anywhere. Thirdly, I probably had enough Tennent's Lager when I was up in the Scotland anyway, so yeah, it's probably worked out for the better. Right, so let's get into talking about Tennents. So the Tennents family, their connection with brewing dates back to 1556 when Robert Tennent established a small brewery on the banks of the Mollendare Burn in Glasgow. Pronunciation probably well out, I do apologise as always. So the family continued their brewing through the generations, well, connections to brewing, I should say, until about the 6th generation, when brothers Hugh and Robert Tennent established the H&R Tennent partnership and moved into commercial scale brewing at their Drygate brewery. After Hugh and Robert died, Hugh's son John and Robert took control of the brewery and they renamed it to J&R Tennent in 1769. In the 1790s, the duo purchased the neighbouring brewery of William McLeho's, and that brought their actual brewing land to 5 acres, 20,000 square metres. With this expansion, they also renamed the site from Drygate to Well Park, which remains being called to this date. It was towards the end of the 18th century that J&R Tennent first exported their beer to America. So it's important to sort of point out this stage that Tennents would have been producing ales and stouts, and the ales for the domestic market would have been dark ales and maybe would have been around 4.5% to 6% mark. But for the export to America, in order to survive that journey across the seas, which could be 25 to 30 days in length, the ale had to be of a stronger ABV. This would be, as we sort of call it now, the Scotch Ale or the wee heavy. And just so happens I have a bottle of the Scotch Ale here, which is at 9%. So I'm just going to quickly grab myself a glass. Whoops, smashing that. And unfortunately, I've still got this bottle opener. And let's pour and see what this Scotch Ale at 9% is like. All right, it's 9%. I am going to go easy on this. I'm not going to pour the whole bottle just yet. Just looking to see if it said anything. No, lots of writing for what is potentially an export market. All right, malt heavy, a big malty nose. Malt. I'm not getting the ABV on it though, but a lot of malt. All right, let's tuck in and see what this tastes like. Okay, you know, at 9%, this should be close-ish to the beers that they were exporting in the 18th century. It does have a Tennent's-ish taste to it. Quite, if it was lower ABV, I'd say it's sticky or sickly on the back of the mouth, but it's too strong to have that. It's malty, it's strong, nothing inoffensive about it. It's just, yeah, not as much flavour I thought it would be. I had high hopes for these bottle ones. Oh well, it is what it is. Right, so over the next 80 years, you know, they had varying members of the Tennent's family take control of the business. But I think not worth covering, you know, one person passing on to another, but it was important to sort of note that by the mid 19th century, J&R Tennent were the largest bottled beer exporter in the world, which was obviously helped in part by the British Empire, ensuring that, you know, supplying beer to India and likes. In 1876, the infamous red T logo was registered as a trademark, and up in Scotland, particularly in the West Highlands, the west of Scotland and the Highlands, you're more likely to identify a pub with the red T logo sticking out from the side than you are seeing sort of pub signs like you do in England and Wales. There are exceptions to that rule, but generally that's how it is. When you go over Edinburgh or elsewhere, it's not quite so much, but definitely West Coast and up into the Highlands, it is more just they have a T. In 1884, yet another tenant, Hugh Tennent, was in charge, and he took over, and he was aged 21 when he took control of the brewery. But he was set to define the brewery for the next century, because Hugh had travelled around Bavaria in the 1880s. I'm just going to have a quick sip. No. And he had taken quite a liking to the light carbonated pilsners and lagers. So once he took control of the brewery, he worked towards making his own lager, which was launched in 1885. I don't have that here. Sadly, or perhaps luckily, on my visit to the Tennent's Brewery, where I picked all these beers up, they didn't have their 5% 1885 Tenants Lager, which comes in this sort of bottle. Otherwise, I'd be tasting that right now. Kind of lucky there. Due to the success of the lager sales, Hugh actually built a brand new lager brewery, which took about 2-3 years to complete and opened in 1891. As we know, the early 20th century wasn't great for the world, with war, economic depression, more war. Yet Tennent's managed to survive through these periods, and actually, I believe they were the only brewery in Glasgow that did make it through. Even during this period, they continued to innovate, with launching their first draft lager in 1924, and then they launched their first canned beers in 1935. In 1963, I know it's a big leap because we've got the war years and rations, but the next big mark's 1963, when J&R Tennent were bought out by Charrington United Breweries, who are a large brewery that were founded in Bethnal Green in London. There was a lot of consolidation over the next few years in the UK beer market. So Tennent's were then merged into the Charrington subsidiary, which was Caledonian Breweries, in 1966, and they became Tennent Caledonian Breweries, which is a name they still use today, and they produce Tennent beers and Caledonian beers. In 1967, Tennent's became part of the largest UK brewing company when Charrington merged with Bass and Mitchell & Butlers to become Bass Charrington, which latterly changed to just Bass PLC. So before I go any further into these mergers, I sort of feel it's time to crack open another of the beers. And again, I'm going to go for one I've not had before. To be fair, I think I've had 2 of these on the table before. So I'm going to grab the one that stands out to me most, which is their whiskey one. So let me just get a glass for that. Now, okay, clear glass bottle, whereas the other ones are brown. Not sure about that immediately. Let's get this open. Oh, wow. Yeah, I had a right to be concerned. That let off a massive skunk smell as soon as I cracked the bottle open there. But I'm not going to prejudge that because the Holt beers that I had sort of let off a sort of skunk smell like that, and they were actually blooming delicious. So just could be how, you know, it smells or comes across. Okay, so on the nose, I'm just getting the skunk smell, sadly. All right, not too much carbonation, slow rising carbonation. All right, let's have a taste of it. That's slightly bizarre. I think the bottle's skunked. The smelled skunked, the hops have skunked in it, but the flavour when it first goes in is a bit skunked, but then the whiskey notes come through, which really redeem it. And I sort of think, if this wasn't skunked, it may have been better. So I think this beer was originally brewed exclusively for the export market, but you know, you can pick it up at the brewery. It's 6%, and they state the beer is aged with single malt Scotch whiskey oak chips. Now, I'm not a fan of calling a beer whiskey aged when it is a process of they're not putting it into whiskey barrels to age it. They're just taking whiskey casks, breaking them up, and then chucking the whiskey chips into the beer. What's also strange about that is that those whiskey casks are at the end of their life that no distillery wants them anymore because they feel they've taken all the flavour out of them, and they are then passing them on in a sense to breweries or anyone that wants them, turn into furniture or whatnot. There is a whiskey taste to it, but I prefer these ones to be identified slightly different than just whiskey, you know, barrel. You can't call this whiskey barrel aged. It's whiskey chips, I would call it. But that's actually better than I thought it'd be, especially based off that smell. Right, let's get back to the whole Bass and Tennent Caledonian breweries. So the biggest change in the beer market happened with the launch of keg lagers in 1963, of which Tenants Lager was one of those that launched in that year, because obviously it was owned by the biggest brewery in the UK. In the 60s, keg lager, or no, lager in general, I think, actually accounted for 1% of the UK beer market. But obviously this would increase massively over the decades, where by the 2000s, it accounted for half of the UK beer market. And Tenants Lager in that time has also claimed 60% of the Scottish lager market, making it the #1 lager in Scotland by a long margin. It's worthwhile saying not much innovation or notes to account happened in those years. There were investments in new equipment and modernising the brewery, as you would have seen at, you know, the other large commercial breweries. I think the next sort of big point comes in June 2000. So in June 2000, Bass was bought out by Belgian brewer Interbrew, which then went on to merge with Brazilian brewer Ambev to create InBev. And as you know, the beer market never rests long. And in 2008, Anheuser-Busch merged with InBev to then create AB InBev. Hang with me here. We're nearly at the end of these mergers. And it all comes down to this. In August 2009, C&C Group of Ireland, who are probably most famous for Magnus cider in the UK, bought Tennent Caledonian from AB InBev for £180 million. Now, C&C itself was founded in 1852 in Belfast, and they've dabbled in spirits and soft drinks and alcoholic beverages. I think they sold things on to other companies and, you know, moved with the times to survive through all those years. Under C&C, Tennents have launched quite a few new beers to expand their range beyond lager, which I'll go through in a moment, but one last thing, just tie it all together. In May 2014, C&C Group and William Bross Brewing opened a joint venture brewery on part of the Well Park Brewery site, and they named it Drygate Brewery. And by the way, just so you're wondering, Drygate Brewery were covered in my first series of UK Brewery Project, so, you know, do check that out if you haven't already. I think it's probably time to go on to the core beers. I'll just take a quick sip of the whiskey one again. It's sort of the ones where I have to hold my nose a bit. Don't go by nose, go by taste. There you go. So core beer wise, there's no real surprise. We've got Tenants Lager, which comes in at 4%. Actually, I did have Tenants from the tank at the brewery, and to be honest, it just tastes like Tenants. I don't know what else I was expecting. They also do Tenants gluten-free lager, which comes in at 5%. And they have Tenants Light, which was actually based off the gluten-free lager. And it comes in at 3.5%. And only 66 calories for the bottle. And it may sound weird, but I'm actually going to drink this right now. I'm going to crack this one open, and I can explain why in a moment. Let's just get this bottle open. I'll explain why I'm desperate to crack this one open. Apart from it being probably I was going to say the only Tenants Lager I've got here, but not quite. Let's pour it into this glass, which has a nucleated base. This is a lager, so that should be fine. Create a bit of head. Hopefully not too much of a head. So, again, a clear glass, I'm concerned. Not skunked, but then may not be enough hops for skunking in this stage. Okay, it's a lager. It's very clear, very active with nucleated base on it. Cleanse my palate with that. I mean, it's a light lager. To be fair, it probably tastes a bit better than Tennent's. Yeah, I think the taste is better than a regular Tennent's. It's light, it's easy, if that's what you're interested in. Now, the reason why I opened this one was I seen it when I was on Isla, and I was at a pub by the ferry, waiting for the ferry in a sense, and they had Tenants Light and some other stuff there, and I thought, oh, I haven't had Tenants Light, I'll get that one. And they poured it from a tap, and what I got was a dark, malty beer. I've no idea what it was, but I drank it anyways, you know, it's beer. But what made me laugh even more was feel sorry for the poor girl that was on the right of me on the other table. She ordered an IPA, and they dropped the same bloody dark coloured beer on the table. And they flatly said to her, yeah, that's an IPA. Clearly, yeah. But yeah, it's a light lager. I don't think there's that much demand in the UK for light lagers, unlike the US market. So yeah, I'm not sure how well that does. Now, Tennents produce all their beer at Well Park in Glasgow, except for one particular beer, Tennent Super. Tennent Super was licensed back to AB InBev straight after the acquisition and is brewed at their Luton brewery. So the Tennent Super in the UK is 7.5%, but I do know stronger ABV cans are available elsewhere in Europe, up to like 9%. Tennent's also make a beer called Black Tea, which I don't know if that's like it's not a black lager. That's not what was served. It's like Stella Black, but Stella Black's actually a lower ABV. This Black Tea is 4.7%. They do Tennent Zero, as everyone's getting into that on the market. They do Tennent Special at 3.5%, which is a Scotch Ale that I was expecting the worst of, but was actually all right. Especially when it just says Tennent Special, Quality Special Ale. If you've got the word special twice. But that's not bad for 3.5% for what it is. Then we sort of come on to some of their more rarer and sort of export beers that they do. So obviously we've got the whiskey oak aged at 6%. We've got the Scotch at 9%. We also have the extra here at 9%, which might just be a Tennent Super in disguise. Who knows? Might have to try that actually, if I can find a Tennent Super anywhere. Then you've got their 1885 lager that I mentioned before, which is 5%. And they have a gluten-free version of that as well at the same ABV. Then you've got a Tennent's India Pale Ale, 6.2, which I would have loved to have tried. They have a hopscotch whiskey, which is hopscotch, which is not whiskey, hopscotch, which is 5% whiskey oaked beer. And then we have the 4.7% Tennent Stout. And then, leaving it till last at the moment, we have here Sweetheart Stout, which I know it's not quite got the Tennent's logo on it, but it says Younger of Aloha or Aloha. I don't know pronunciation of that. And this is 2% stout for half a litre. I don't know if that's a bargain or not. It cost me $1.72. I've got the little sticker still on the top there. Bought from Port Ellen on Islay. There you go. And actually, whilst I'm reminded of it, by the Sweetheart Stout here, in the late 50s, Tennent's created a series of 20 special can designs, and each was displaying an image of a girl and a recipe which could use the beer as an ingredient. But as we reached the whole swinging 60s and the notion that sex sells, this then led into their infamous range of cans, their Lager Lovelies. And when I was at the brewery, they had a huge collection of cans from the yearly releases that they would do of these. I found 1976 funny, as it was just penny. Other years had different people. 76, just penny. Penny in the morning, penny at noon, penny in the evening, at night. It was just that I showed off some cleavage on the can. Morning, noon, night, no difference. I don't think anything else could say 60s and 70s more than those designs. How times have changed. I think I've droned on enough actually. I don't believe Tennent's have won any awards of significance since the introduction of the lager in the 19th century, which sort of brings this UK Brewery Project to a wrap. Thanks again for watching, and see you in the next episode. I'm still, nice whiskey taste, just, it's the nose. Put that in a proper brown glass, not a white one like they have it.